let's get into that transaction wire a little bit. Drew, we talked about LSU at the beginning of the show. Over the last week, LSU's been on a heater. They now climb up to number 4 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings, and a lot of that has to do with the 2 5-stars that they added. Let's start with DJ Pickett, Drew. This one went a little bit back and forth. We talked about it last week. It was Oregon, it was Miami, it was LSU, the 3 hats on the table. We talked about the teams that needed this recruitment the most. You talked about Miami, I talked about LSU, and really, ultimately, at the end of the day, that necessity for LSU, Corey Raymond, the defensive backs coach there in Baton Rouge, to bring LSU back to what they're capable of and what they've been known as DBU. Drew, they get DJ Pickett in the boat. Is he a corner? Is he a safety? There's been a lot made about that. But just in terms of the way DJ Pickett is kind of put together, he's really what you like to call a black swan. 6'4", 180 pounds, runs 10.62, can do a lot of different things, two-way player. This is a kid that's going to have to put on some weight at the next level. But in terms of like getting LSU back in that conversation of what they can be when it comes to their defensive back room, they have not been close to that standard over the last 2 years under Brian Kelly. Getting Corey Raymond back in the boat, getting guys like DJ Pickett certainly helps with that cause.
Yeah, and I think when you look at LSU's recruiting class up to number 4, they have the number 1 quarterback in the country committed, but I get excited about these defenders, and it starts with DJ Pickett and then some of those pass rushers. I mean, Pickett, I think he's someone where it's going to take a bit of an adjustment period. He hasn't played a ton of quarter there at Zephyr Hills High School. He's done most of his damage and made the biggest impact as a wide receiver, but from a pure athlete standpoint, you mentioned the length, but how about that suddenness, the top end gear? This is a guy that should see the field early, given what LSU has kind of brought in the past few years. You mentioned they got away from it. This used to be a program where it was DBU, and Corey Raymond brings it back with getting this big commitment. I think Cooper also stands out about the DJ Pickett announcement. Like, when is the last time we've had one like this where he put on that LSU hat? I thought he was going to throw it aside and put on an Oregon one. Like, there was some rare excitement, which is rare to see in the name, image, likeness era. But it's a big win for LSU. I mean, they got the commitment, got to get it across the finish line. But there's certainly reason to be excited about what they did there last week.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. He put on the LSU hat, and I kept thinking, all right, it's going to be one of those recruitments. Maybe it's like 3 shirts that he's got to go through or a couple hats that he's got to go through. Looks like, as of right now, DJ Pickett sticking with LSU. Big gift for Corey Raymond, Blake Baker, the rest of the staff there, and certainly Brian Kelly. But LSU wasn't done. A few days later, they go add Derek Meadows, top 32 player and 5-star out of Las Vegas, and Bishop Gorman. We have talked a lot about him on this show. Drew, the other thing that I want to kind of bring up here, between Derek Meadows and DJ Pickett, you're talking about 2 of the biggest enigmas in the class in terms of athletic upside. 6'6.5", 200 pounds with Derek Meadows. You go through the profile. This is a guy that has all the physical tools that you could possibly dream up at the receiver position. You and I have had a lot of trouble really trying to come up with a player comparison because there's not a lot of guys that make sense. I think Mike Evans is the closest one that we have landed on. But absent DeCorian Moore, who moves on, decommits from LSU, goes to Oregon. You have Teron Francis in the class as well. Cortez Hankton, he's made quite a living. Guys like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Lad McConkey during his days at Georgia. Drew, this one was interesting on a lot of different levels, but let's start with LSU getting Derek Meadows in the boat, beating Notre Dame head-to-head, and one that they really felt like they had to have.
Different type of athlete than DeCorian Moore, but I think if you're Bryce Underwood, you got to be excited about the possibility of throwing it to Derek Meadows. And you mentioned Cortez Hankton. He was on our show a few months ago. What did he talk about? He wants wide receivers that are multi-sport athletes. Derek Meadows 2 years ago was the Nevada Gatorade Player of the Year for track and field. He's an elite hurdler, someone that hasn't had the on-field production just yet, only 19 catches as a junior, but he's been playing behind a ton of talented upperclassmen that all could make an impact in college football here in 2024. So we keep saying it, right? We want to see Derek Meadows do it on the field here as a senior. I think there's a good chance he becomes a breakout star in the high school football world. He's got that early season matchup, his team traveling all the way down to South Florida. He's going to be paired up most likely with our number 1 ranked corner in the class of 2026, Justice Fitzpatrick. Minka's brother is going to be lined up across from him. That's a matchup we have circled to see what Derek Meadows is able to do. But I love the fit for LSU. Again, it's a little bit different than what they've brought in recently. But man, he's a one-of-one talent and another nice addition for the Tigers. Coop, what stands out to me, right? LSU, if you look at our rankings, I was going through this morning. They have 8 players that are in our quote day 1, day 2 range, right? So that's rounds 1, 2, and 3. Only 2 of them are from Louisiana of that 8. The rest of them are from around the country. LSU is doing it nationally right now. They're going to all different pockets. They also have 18 commits total. 8 of them are from Louisiana, but they got 3 from Florida, 2 from Texas, 1 from Arkansas, 1 from Indiana, 1 from Michigan, 1 from Mississippi. This seems like the new age type of recruiting, right? Getting the guys in state. The top 2 prospects from Louisiana committed in Harlem Berry, Devin Harper. Outside of that, though, they're going to all these different talent pockets, and they're getting the best of the best heading into these senior seasons.
I think what's interesting, you look at this Derek Meadows recruitment and really the DJ Pickett recruitment. I talked about Oregon and Miami, but you're talking about 2 of the biggest programs in terms of investment when it comes to talent acquisition on the NIL side in Oregon and Miami. LSU has been a team under Brian Kelly over the last 2 years that has been pretty much dinged in their local market for not really kind of being as maybe as aggressive in the NIL market. Now you go out, you get a guy like DJ Pickett. I mentioned Oregon and Miami. You have to go through Derek Meadows. From what I understand, Notre Dame put a very competitive offer on the table. LSU, to be able to go out and get Bryce Underwood, the number 1 player in the country, add a guy like DJ Pickett on the back end at a premium position, then Derek Meadows as well. I think it speaks volumes to how far LSU has come on the NIL front in a very short amount of time. The other part of this, I mentioned Notre Dame, Drew. Here's the part that I find interesting on the flip side. Notre Dame did everything right. And we talked about NIL, and we talked about the great equalizer. They did everything right in the recruitment of Derek Meadows. They got him to camp a year ago when Derek Meadows only had 1 Power 4 offer. That was Utah. He goes out, he balls out at camp. They get the early offer. They get him on campus. They do a tremendous job with the recruitment. LSU doesn't offer until February of 2024. Then you have the summer official visits. LSU goes the week after Notre Dame. Notre Dame has done everything right, and this is a position of need where they need to get bigger, and they need to get faster, and they need to get stronger, and they need to get more dynamic. We have talked about Notre Dame's quarterback room ad nauseum, what they have there. Riley Leonard, Kenny Minchie, C.J. Clark, Deuce Knight. There is a lot to work with at that position. At the skill position, it seems like they're having an incredibly difficult time right now, and I don't think we're talking about that. I think a lot of kudos are going to LSU, and rightfully so, but Notre Dame on the other end of this, I thought to myself, what do you do? What can you do if you're Marcus Freeman to kind of, you go back to Dante Moore, to Keon Keeley, to Peyton Bowen. These guys just start to add up a little bit more and more. And you and I talked about this a year ago. You just got to get back in the batter's box, and you got to continue to take swings. This is discouraging, though, because ultimately at the end of the day, I believe they had a better offer financially on the table for a guy like Derek Meadows. They still lose out. So what do you do to course correct, right? Because they are stepping up to the table from an NIL standpoint. I just find this incredibly discouraging for Notre Dame, this one particular recruitment where, quite honestly, they checked every single box and they still weren't able to get it done.
Well, they got to keep chopping wood here. I mean, I don't have the answer as to what they're supposed to do, but you mentioned Keon Keeley, Peyton Bowen, all those other guys, but how about Bryce Young, right? They picked up a commitment from him. I'm talking about the 5-star pass rusher in the 2024 cycle. When they landed his pledge, I mean, he was a 3-star prospect, finishes in the top 32 for us after an excellent week at the All-American Bowl. I think it comes down to identifying the right individuals. They have to volume shoot. You want to talk about the summer camps and the potential changes coming to the recruiting calendar and that window shrinking. Yeah, it didn't work out with Derek Meadows, but it worked out in the past because you identified Bryce Young as a Notre Dame type of kid, and you got him committed, you got him signed, sealed, and delivered, and we're going to see him making an impact eventually there in South Bend. So it stings, certainly, but you got to toughen up, and I think you got to keep embracing these type of battles and really honing in on that ID. Again, I think it's the volume play. You got to just keep getting those guys on campus. You look at who they had on in South Bend last month for the Irish Invasion. We saw that kind of roster. They do an excellent job, I think, of IDing the young, rising juniors, rising seniors. So to me, I would tell Marcus Freeman, hey, didn't get this one, back at it next go round.
Yeah, keep fighting the good fight if you're Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. Drew, the last thing on Derek Meadows, and I want to give some context here. Derek Meadows right now, the number 32 ranked player in the country. That means he's got the last spot as a 5-star. Drew, this was one of, I think, the biggest projections that you and I, the rest of the scouting team, has made in terms of giving a player with the lack of production of Derek Meadows a 5th star. And the reason why we felt so comfortable with that is because we mentioned just kind of the unicorn traits that he has between the size, speed, and athleticism playing at a program like Bishop Gorman. We're really, really betting on him taking that leap from his junior to his senior season, Drew, but we are still waiting for that production to kind of match what we've seen physically. So a little fact or fiction question, and you can kind of answer this whatever way you want, but I thought about it this morning on my drive into work. Like, is Derek Meadows, if you were a betting man right now, is he going to be a 5-star when this is all said and done in February of 2025 when we're putting out the last Top 247 update?
I'm going to say fact. I would amount more confident in that fact. This was back in January before LSU offered, and we saw him dominate that Battle Miami 7-on-7 tournament. He was unreal, right? Not only making contested catches, but he was running away from would-be tacklers, two-hand touchers in the open field, which is pretty hard to do in that setting when you're 6'6", 200 pounds. Didn't get a ton of exposure to him the past few months. I believe he was dealing with some type of injury. So I'm going to say fact, but again, that first 3-4 games from the senior season I think will be so important, and then hopefully we get him in one of these all-star games, the All-American Bowl. But I'm buying into it because he is, a freak athlete.